And now, CL 650 presents your source for leading-edge news and information on today's hottest products and services. This is Experts on Call.
And welcome to Experts on Call. I'm Joanne Sutton, and our theme on today's show is everything about insurance. And more specifically, we're going to be speaking about auto insurance. And we're talking everything that moves with wheels, motorcycles, RVs, classic cars, the whole gamut. Joining us in the studio today from Intact Insurance, we have Patrick Magnuson, along with Andrew Tablotny of Laguerre Pelling Insurance. And a new guest today is Carmen Monroy, personal lines specialist with Intact Insurance. Now, welcome to all three of you. Thanks for joining us. Carmen, you're brand new to the program. Andrew and Patrick have been here as anchors all along, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with Intact.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a personal lines specialist, so I support both the management and the underwriting team and the personal lines department. I've been with Intact for almost 13 years now, and I really enjoy what I do.
So what is the actual, we know what the title is as a line specialist. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, for underwriters, they're going to come across risks or exposures they might not have seen before, or they need some help figuring out how to handle. So I'm available to support them there. They'll come to me first, and then from there we can decide if it needs management's attention or not. I handle a lot of projects on behalf of the management team, so they have time for other things. So it's a little bit of everything, basically.
You sound like that in-between person that keeps everybody happy and the chief problem solver.
Yes, I try. Don't always succeed.
Excellent, excellent. So just before we get into the topic for today, Patrick, I wanted you to start by giving us an idea in general of what Intact Insurance can offer to our listeners and what sets Intact apart from other insurance companies.
Well, Intact is the largest insurance company in Canada. We provide protection for what matters most, which of course is your home, your business, your car. And should the unexpected happen, it's good to know that you can count on us, because we want to get you back to your normal life. Should the unforeseen happen, we can help you do that. So we want to show you that the insurance claims, they're not a bad thing, and that we're here to help everybody understand insurance and the claims process.
And keep it simple for all of us too, right?
And keep it simple, that's right.
So we've never had this chat before today, but basically we would like to talk about auto insurance and touching base on a number of areas, including insuring not just your vehicle. We also want to get into the conversation of insuring motorcycles, RVs, talk about replacement costs as well. So let's just start with the broader topic of auto insurance by doing a basic auto insurance 101. This is what I'm hoping. Many of our listeners have been driving for a very long time. They may be taking some things for granted. So what are the key aspects that every driver in British Columbia should be considering when it comes to auto insurance? And really is step number one, finding a quality insurance broker. So who wants to start? Patrick or Andrew?
Sure. Well, I think you have to find an insurance broker to get auto insurance. So and you would need one that sells ICBC coverage. So, the basics of auto insurance is that ICBC is a Crown corporation, and they are responsible for selling, at minimum, the mandatory coverage of $200,000 third-party liability, which is the coverage for if you hit someone or something, as well as $1 million of uninsured motorist protection, which we'll get into a little bit later. So those two items are really called the mandatory coverage. They also sell the optional coverage, but you don't have to go through ICBC through the optional coverage. So I think one of the things that we really want to focus on in this show is that you do have choices. They're maybe not as obvious in British Columbia as they are in other provinces where you have to go through private insurers, but you do have choices. So by finding a broker and going to a broker, they'll be able to explain and provide you with some of those choices and those options.
So, Andrew, what are some of those choices? And I think for a lot of listeners, I don't think the average person really understands that they have other options than ICBC.
Well, depending on who the broker's contracted with. Like I'm now with Intact, and I've got another company that also writes private auto. So I actually offer coverage through two different companies for private auto. I have other companies that provide coverage for motorcycles, coverages for your ATVs. A lot of people don't realize that you have options as far as insuring those types of items as well. So
It's easy to become complacent in sort of an environment where you think there's just one provider who gives you your coverage, and every year you get your renewal from them, and you kind of go into anywhere to get that renewed, and of course it's tied to your plate, and it's like I say, it's a very different environment than a lot of the other provinces within Canada. But like I say, it's easy to get complacent, but that's what a broker is there for. I mean, they're not just an ICBC paper processor. They are an insurance expert, and that umbrella is much bigger than just one company.
And I want to pick up on that word complacent because, too often I get clients come in and we try to explain to them what's going on in the marketplace, and too often they just sit down and they say to my staff, just renew it as is. And they say, but I want to, review your coverage. No, just renew it as is. And people need to be aware that, there's ramifications on how you're insured and what you're insured for. So you should always be prepared to sit down and spend 5 minutes just going over reviewing your coverage with your broker to make sure that you understand the changes that have occurred in the marketplace. Explain maybe possible changes that have occurred in your life that may be impacting your insurance, which could lead to a breach in your insurance if you don't declare it.
Sure, it could be, we've aged a year, maybe our kids or the drivers of the vehicle have aged a year, or maybe the vehicle has turned the corner into being a vintage or classic vehicle. And I hope today's conversation will help clear up a number of those.
I'm more concerned about I'm now driving further to work than I was before, or I've now got a teenage driving the vehicle, which I didn't have before.
That's right. So you can't just do the automatic.
Or I'm now working out of the province, so there's all kinds of little glitches in the system that can come back to bite you if you don't make sure have that discussion.
I intend to go down to Arizona for 6 months during the winter.
Yeah, all very good points.
Andrew mentioned be prepared to spend 5 minutes. The few times that if I'm in Walmart and I see that there's someone there with their or a cart full of groceries, 4 kids, a baby under the arm, and they're trying to renew their ICBC policy, and I just think, well, you may not have allocated quite enough time and focused energy that the task requires, because it's not just as simple as getting a stamp, or it shouldn't be perceived as being as simple as just getting a stamp. It requires the discussion with an insurance professional. So to do that, you might need to allocate a little bit of time where you can focus and be able to have that good solid discussion.
Sure, we're talking about insuring your vehicle, and we all know how dangerous driving can be.
Yeah, not just your vehicle, but your liability too. So it's your actions as well. That's the expensive part.
Absolutely. So how do you actually find a good broker, Andrew?
Well, I guess you find one that's prepared to have that conversation with you, and takes the time to try and inform you, and wants to spend the time with you to make sure that your needs are being met and your exposures are properly insured.
And do rates actually vary that much between companies, and brokers can find better deals? Because I think for the insurer, they always, it always comes down to the bottom line of cost.
I think there's more than just cost. I think that's what we're trying to get away from is you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. So something may be the same or similar price, but it may be a very different level, kind, and quality of coverage. And that's where the broker can help. They tell you, the ICBC policy will be the same cost as this through a private insurer, but in the event that the unforeseen happens, you're going to have a much more satisfactory claims experience with this company. So what is that worth? So I think that's part of that has to be part of the discussion.
Well, here's a little example. With the Intact policy, they cover rock chips. ICBC, if you have a rock chip, you've got to go and pay it to
deductible.
Well, no, you got to pay $25 to get it repaired. So
on your windshield, yeah.
On your windshield. Mm-hmm. So it's a little thing, but again, if your broker doesn't deal with Intact or one of the other companies, they wouldn't be able to offer you that. So sometimes maybe it's worthwhile to pick up the phone and phone around and ask if you've got alternative markets.
Okay, can we talk a little bit about some of the coverage options?
Sure.
What types of coverage options? This is where Carmen sneaks in, right?
Yeah. Some examples are our core product includes maybe some items that other markets wouldn't. You've got things like all of our policies include roadside assistance, $100 per occurrence, which can be a little bit more than average. We have endorsements that you can purchase that will allow for deductible waivers in certain scenarios, like a theft of your vehicle. And then we also provide additional coverage like our expert driver package. It gives you benefits if you're traveling with your vehicle in North America. And say something happens to your car while you're away. Sometimes you might only think about the actual repair to your vehicle, but you've got other considerations, like if your vehicle needs to be there for a month, but you can't, how do you get back home?
Oh, so it's say I'm on holidays in California or Arizona. I've got my vehicle down there, and whether it's an accident or a break-in or whatever, it's not just your vehicle you're talking about.
No, exactly. So we provide benefits to get both you and your vehicle back home if you've purchased this coverage, along with covering the automobile itself.
So the base policy covers the dent in the car, and these extra coverages cover the dent in your pocketbook as a result of that car.
Right. So your travel expenses to get back home, or
stay in a hotel. You have to those kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. What about rates? Auto insurance rates. The difference between men and women insuring their vehicles.
I think that's it might be an oversimplification. I don't think you just look at one factor and say, well, this is the reason for the rate. It's a complex system that takes into account a large number of variables. The gender issue really is only under a certain age. So all things being equal, a young male, and by young I mean under the age of 25, under young male or young female will pay more than somebody who is more experienced and has more years of insurance experience.
That applies to ICBC as well, though. So I mean, it's
Sure.
The ages. Well, with ICBC, they're non-gender issues. So the private companies across Canada, look at go more in depth to that. They're able to quote, I guess, discriminate, if you want to use that term. But they're being more actuarially responsible from that perspective. ICBC being a Crown corporation has certain requirements to meet the government requirements. So they don't differentiate between young men and young women the way some of the private companies do, which is the private company's prerogative to make sure that they're underwriting the risks to meet the actual needs of the exposure.
Okay, so if I'm in the example of I've purchased my optional insurance from a resident broker, not from Intact, and if I make a claim, is my insurance going to go up automatically, or?
Well, it depends. It depends what the claim is. Certainly things like under comprehensive losses, like there's hail damage or there's a fire, or uninsured motorist protection losses, which we'll get into later, or hit and runs. Basically, anything that's not your fault will have no impact on your rate. We were talking just about all the various rating factors that go into your premium. Well, one of those is going to be the number of years that you've been at-fault claims free. So if you have an at-fault claim, intuitively that number is now smaller. So, that said, we do provide an accident forgiveness coverage. Carmen, was it every 4 years or something?
Yeah. With Intact Insurance, you get one accident forgiveness with every 4 years that you're at fault, accident free. So technically, if you have a claim once every 5 or 6 years, your claims free rating is going to stay the same.
Oh, I like that.
Not that you can have a claim.
Yeah. Only had one, knock on wood. What kind of protection is available if I happen to be responsible for that crash?
Well, that's your third-party liability protection.
Okay.
And that basically covers a third party is you're the first party, the insurer is the second party, and third party is everybody else. So if you run into a telephone pole and damage the pole, or if you run into another car and you damage that car or injure the occupants in that car, that's your third-party liability coverage. Protects you for all of the...
So the first 200,000 is from ICBC. So ICBC picks up the majority of the claims that involve third party. So it's only when you get into egregious bodily injury that you start to see potentially the private companies end up picking up part of the tab.
Yeah, or if you hit something really expensive.
Well, I suppose.
Like?
I'm sure there's some cars over 200,000.
Yeah, there's the odd one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What about hit and run damage?
Hit and run is there's a lot. BC is a unique place, and we like that BC is unique. But
I like how you present that.
Yeah, but BC deals with hit and run very uniquely. So, ICBC actually, as part of your mandatory coverage, they pay for a hit and run damage that occurs. I believe it's on a highway, Carmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, on a provincial highway. With
the definition of provincial highway is anywhere that isn't a private residence.
Private.
So if you had a hit and run in your driveway of your house, that wouldn't be covered. But if it's parked on the street, then you'd be covered.
Okay,
there we go.
Good to clarify that, though.
Yeah, but they pay with a $750 deductible. So if you buy collision coverage through Intact or any other private insurer, but specifically with Intact, that hit and run claim still goes through ICBC. But because you've purchased collision coverage and your deductible is, if your deductible is lower than $750, what we'll do is we'll reimburse you that difference in deductible. So again, it's a very interesting and unique situation that is very BC specific.
And of course, every instance is very individual as well.
Of course.
And lastly, to wrap up this initial discussion on Insurance 101, what would be your best explanation of replacement cost for a vehicle if it's been written off in an accident?
Well, replacement cost is is to replace it with a new vehicle of similar kind and quality. But again, I think the key there is the new part. So if you had if your car was 3 years old, we're not going to replace it with a 3-year-old vehicle. We'll replace it with the 2016 model that is the same vehicle. So your 2013 Infinity will be replaced with a 2016 Infinity.
Just to clarify that, the policy, the replacement cost policy is only applicable to the first 3 model years. So if you have a 2016, 2015, 14, or 13 and bought the intact policy and then wrote the car off a month later, they would give you if you wrote it off, let's say in January, they would then give you a 2016 vehicle. So.
You've been listening to the auto insurance experts here from Intact Insurance, Patrick Magnuson and Carmen Monroy. Also resident broker Andrew Tablotny from Laguerre Pelling Insurance in Richmond. This is Experts on Call, and if you have any questions about the discussion we've had so far, please go to the website. You can always get more information online at intact.ca. Next up, we'll find out some tips and tricks about purchasing the best insurance for all of your vehicles. Stay with us on CL 650.
This is Experts on Call on CL 650.